Welcome to the Growth Through Adversity podcast, where men are forged, not coddled. Here we dive deep into the path of true transformation in pursuit of physical, mental, spiritual, and temporal growth. We talk training, nutrition, business, mindset, and spirituality. We embrace strength and we loathe ease. We reject weakness in every form and cultivate power, the will to power itself. This is the rebirth of modern man. Raw masculinity, tempered by reason, virtue, and right action, because nothing of value is earned without sacrifice. Let's begin our apotheosis together. Welcome to another episode of the Growth Through Adversity podcast with your host, Ragnar the Warwolf. So today we're going to talk about building muscle effectively, and we're going to talk about specifically progressive overload. So growth through adversity, the only way to grow is through stress. I believe that's universal, and it definitely applies to fitness, through load and through progressive demand. Most guys don't build the physique they want because they don't understand the overload code. They don't understand the whole principle driving why their muscles grow and why they get stronger, right? Because it's not just about showing up. It's not just about going to the gym. It's about training properly and training effectively. And the benefits of this are going to be clarity, direction, and just a proven method that works. This has been extensively researched, and it's just something that anybody that's been in the gym a long time knows either intelligently or instinctively. And if you don't, you're just kind of going to stay stuck. You're going to spin your wheels and you're going to waste a lot of time training. And I don't want to see that for any of you guys. So pay close attention. So the principle of overload: muscles only grow in response to a stress that exceeds that which they've adapted to. So, oh my God. Sorry about that, guys. Big technical errors. Muscles only grow in response to a stress that exceeds that which they've adapted to. So what that means is that when you really think about that, the whole way that muscles work is that they have a certain load that they're capable of handling and resisting, right? And the whole idea of training is to exceed that load. But this is where people fuck up. Once you exceed that load and your muscles, so if you start bench pressing and you can bench 185 for 5 reps, and then it gets to where you can bench 185 for 8 reps and 10 reps. And a lot of people just kind of stay in that comfort zone doing the same weights over and over again. But your body has now adapted to that. That's now became its norm. That's what it's used to. And it doesn't have any stimulus to grow any muscle beyond that, right? So if you keep benching 185 pounds for 10 reps, you're not going to grow any more muscle beyond that point. It's just your body is very efficient. And our body, from an evolutionary standpoint, doesn't really like growing muscle, especially excessive muscle. Our metabolism wants us to have just enough muscle to be able to survive and to be able to get away from predators and to protect ourselves, but it doesn't want any more than that. And that's a pretty minimal amount of muscle. If you look at like primitive hunter-gatherer societies, they don't look like the fucking Marvel guys. You know what I mean? They're thin, they're wiry, they're lean. That is what our metabolism is actually adapted for. So growing copious and excessive amounts of muscle like we like to in the West, on top of that, it requires you to kind of make your metabolism do what it doesn't want to do. And you're going to have to give it the stimulus to do it. You're going to have to basically tell it that we need it. We need more muscle and we need to be stronger because I demand that you lift more and more weights, right? So if this stimulus doesn't progress, then growth is going to stop. The body is going to become lazy and efficient because the body is lazy and efficient. It's the human body or any organism is incredibly efficient. So if you give it a certain amount of stimulus without loading that stimulus and adding more weight or adding more reps over time, you're not giving it any reason to grow. I've seen a lot of people get plateaued like this, where they'll do really good in the beginning, they'll kind of get their numbers up, and then they'll stop this process of progressive overload because it kind of gets to where it gets out of the range of their comfort zone. And then they just kind of get stuck and plateaued until we re-stimulate this process and get the progressive overload kicking again. So there are 2 types of progressive overload. And this is kind of the two systems I use anyways. There's probably, I'm sure, more than this, but this is what I found to be, this is how I've categorized progressive overload over the years. So we've got, first of all, we've got vertical overload. This is what you think of when you think of progressive overload. This is increasing load on the bar over time, right? It's very effective, right? So for example, if you start out, you're benching 225 by 3 reps. You'll do that for a couple weeks. Then you'll go up to 235 by 3 reps. Do that for a little while. Then you'll go up to 245 by 3 reps. And so you're progressively overloading. You're getting stronger. This is going to force muscle fibers to adapt to the greater tension, because every jump up in weight creates more muscular tension, which is going to drive more hypertrophy, and which is going to drive more strength gains as well. So the pros to this is you're going to get rapid strength gains and you're going to get incredibly dense muscle, right? The cons is that it's pretty easy to abuse it and to get caught in a cycle of ego lifting, breakdown, overtraining, injury risk. So I actually don't recommend that method to start with, although it is very effective and I had to go over it. What I always set my clients up with is called what we call horizontal overload. And this is done by adding reps. So you keep the weight steady, but you add reps across sets. So for that same example, if we started at 225 for 6 reps, we're going to build up every week. The next week, maybe we'll do 225 by 7. The week after that, 8. The week after that, 9. The week after that, 10. Once you get to that 10 rep range, or you progress 3 or 4 reps from your starting point at the same weight, then you increase the weight a little bit and you start back down at the bottom end of that range. This is an awesome way to use rep ranges and horizontal progressive overload. What I like about it is not only does it build strength, it builds endurance. It really pumps muscle volume into fibers, and it's really great for hypertrophy and muscle growth. And more than that, it's super safe and effective because you're not overloading through weight, you're overloading through reps. So it's a weight that you're pretty comfortable working with, and you're just adding more reps. And then over time, you're adding more weight after you work your way up higher. So I found this to be very safe and effective. It reduces the likelihood of lifting injuries, and I found it to be a very good way to do it. So for example, I had a client that was stuck at a 315 squat, and he was like, man, no matter what I do, if I try 320, I fail. It scares the shit out of me. I think I'm going to hurt myself. And so I kind of dug a little deeper and was like, what have you been doing? What does that 315 look like? And he says, well, I can get 315 by 4 reps with no problem. And so he had been doing 315 by 4 reps on his heavy days for something like 6 months. And he had, maintained muscle very well, but he had stopped growing and he had stopped getting stronger. So we started to just slowly milk it up, and we got him to 315 by like 8 reps over the course of about a month and a half, by just slowly adding a rep every other week. And then we were able to take him up. And I think his most recent was a 365 bench. So he took squat. So he took a squat from 315 to 365 just by using this method. And he didn't hurt himself in the process. So like I said, I kind of utilize both. They're woven together, but in a very intelligent fashion. I really like to focus on the horizontal overload, where we're adding reps at a certain weight until we get 3 or 4 reps beyond that weight. And then we go back to the bottom of our rep range and we increase weight there. And if you do that over the course of a year or 2 years, you're going to grow an incredible amount of muscle, and you're going to get so much fucking stronger. It's going to be unrecognizable. So another thing that I'm a huge believer in is you don't need to chase massive excessive volume. I'm a big believer in 3 workouts a week, 4 workouts a week tops, and in really hard working sets. So less really hard working sets. So a huge fan of like 2 really hard working sets, a good solid warm up. So maybe you'll do 4 or 5 sets on a specific exercise, but the beginning of that is warm up. And then we get to those working sets. We're going all out. We're going to within a rep of failure, or maybe even to technical failure, depending on the exercise, because this is going to produce a lot better results. And this is going to produce a lot more progressive overload over time than fucking around with 20 sets at half-ass. The problem is over 2 hard working sets and quality diminishes, and injury and the potential for injury goes up dramatically. So I like to keep the volume a little bit lower. because training hard or close to failure, as close as you can get to failure or even to technical failure, it really is progressive for tension and it beats the fuck out of training a lot. This is training harder and smarter, not more, which is always better, right? I see a lot of guys in the gym, they just do junk volume. They just do endless sets. They've got garbage fucking intensity. They're stopping with who knows how many reps in reserve. They're not pushing themselves hard, but their workouts are still fucking exhausting. They're like they feel like shit all the time. They get sick all the time. They're run down all the time because they're basically in a state of overreaching because they're just doing a ton of volume, but they're not really getting anything out of it because they're not training very hard in that volume. And the body doesn't count sets. It doesn't really give a shit how many sets you do. It responds to stimulus. So if you can do one really hard set versus four fucking exhausting half-ass bullshit sets, you're going to get more out of that one really hard set. Like I said, it's always better. It's better to fire 5 bullets with precision than 50 blanks, right? So you want to make everything you do maximal ROI. So you want to get the most return on everything you're doing in the gym so you can spend the least amount of time in the gym, the more amount of time doing everything else. And even less than that, it's not even really about time. It's about effectiveness. It's more effective if you train very intensely with less volume than it is to train with a ton of volume and a very low intensity. And that's just a 100% fucking fact. So practical application. Number one, you got to track everything because you're not going to know how to progressively overload if you're not actually tracking where your sets, reps, weights are on everything. So you can do that with an app. Strong is an awesome app. True Coach, the app I use for my clients, has that feature built in. Exercise history. If you're my client, you're watching this, use that because it's fucking huge. Not only will it show you what you did on your last workout at that exercise, it will show you the entire history since you set up your True Count account. So you can see how much you've overloaded and how much you've progressed over the course of 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be. So record everything. It can be, like I said, doesn't have to be digital. It can be in a notebook, but I've found the apps are just so much more effective for it these days, personally. So small jumps are massive over time. 2.5 pounds per week equals 130 pounds per year. You know what I mean? So if you're adding 2.5 pounds to a lift every week, you're adding 130 pounds to that lift for a year. So small and marginal changes progressed over time really accumulate and add up. And again, I can't stress it enough, they significantly reduce the likelihood of injury. So definitely focus on that. And like I said, I like to cycle both vertical and horizontal overload phases. I don't want to be misconstrued there. Like, I do definitely think you should be adding weight over time. I just wouldn't make that your like primary focus is like every single workout I have to add more weight, because you're going to reach a point where your body just cannot do that, right? And then you're going to get into like a range of ego rep of lifting where you're not doing things with good form, you're not doing things with good mechanics, and you're probably going to hurt yourself. And at the very least, you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. So that's where the horizontal phases of overload come in. Just adding reps is a lot easier. We can usually force out one more rep every week, whereas it can be difficult to add more weight, especially when you're working at or near your capacity.